Phew. So suddenly when I press record, my nerves go to high heaven. So welcome to everybody. I am really, really excited to be sharing this space with you. And I'm going to overshare just a little bit. I think that I am so passionate about this topic that just a few minutes before the session started, I thought, oh my God, my body is betraying me. It's doing all kinds of crude and crazy things. And I mean, I don't really feel that way about other. I'm not saying that I don't care as much about other topics. I really do care about other topics. But for me, this particular topic is one that is so vitally important, so vitally essential. It's so close to my own heart that I think that there is an additional nervous system reaction when I talk about it. Because I know what a difference it can make in everyone's life, and I am a function of what a difference it has made in my life. So, as you know me, if you know me, if you've been in my world for 30 seconds, you know I like slides and I do slides. I actually come from a universe where slides are tabooed, but I am defiant. I love my slides. So, I'm going to start a slideshow and then we're going to start having a conversation. But before we get started, I really and truly want to say I don't imagine for a moment that I am the knower of all things related to self-compassion. This is a journey that I've been on for about 4 or 5 years in terms of just, first of all, learning about it, studying it. I don't even think that when I started the journey that I had the capacity in me to even integrate it and to practice it and to just there's a part of me that thought this stuff is fluffy. And I think in a big way, my mind or my egoic mind just rejected it for a very long time. For the past 2 years or so, it's really been a big part of my journey. And certainly last year, it has been a really, really big part of my journey. I think it has shifted quite significantly. And I imagine, my husband is on the call now, so it's not so cool, but I imagine that there's been a softening of me in the process that has made it possible for me to, A, express the things that I care about, because previously I was unable to. And secondly, take up space in places and spaces where I previously feared to tread. And so, what I've learned about self-compassion is that self-compassion is this magical elixir that if we bring it into our lives, it allows us to be braver, to be more courageous. And the root of all self-compassion is in the function that it is we start to give ourselves the things that we are looking for from the world around us. Everyone has an experience of self-compassion, and I am looking forward to learning from you. I'm looking forward to learning with you. And although I speak about self-compassion in general terms on a regular basis, I have never ever done a workshop or a webinar or a thing on self-compassion itself. So I want to say to you that this is my trial run, and you are my co-creators, and I'm going to learn from you. And hopefully when we step forward talking about this, or just showing up in the world a bit more, we all show up with more self-compassion, and we are able to help other people with self-compassion, right? So here goes the slides. And before I go, I just want to share also, please ask questions and please contribute in whatever way you feel you have a contribution to make. I think that learning together, learning collectively is probably the most powerful thing that is available to us as human beings, right? So, and also just like before I get started, like there's a whole array of ladies and Ghalib. I want to ask each one of you, like, why did you choose to sign up for this webinar? What made you say, I'm going to spend my Thursday evening between 7 and 8:30 going to a webinar rather than relaxing and taking care of my, my evening? What makes you want to join a conversation around self-compassion? And what are you hoping to get out of this conversation? Maybe I'll just cancel the thing now. And you're welcome to come on video, to just use audio, or to type in the chat box.
Safia, if I can be the first to offer.
You're always the first, Hilda.
It's the eager beaver in me. I guess for me, it's a topic, that I've heard a lot about, and I think is quite cerebral, but I don't know what it looks like or feels like for me. And so I see the value, and it's something that I yearn to do, but I almost feel like I lack the skill of even knowing what it is.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose, is self-care and self-compassion the same thing? Is it something different? Is it sort of in the same wheelhouse? So I guess I'm just trying to maybe get some clarity on what it is. I understand compassion and hopefully being compassionate for others. But it's when it's for me that I'm like, what the hell? So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Perfect. I love the distinctions that you make between self-care and self-compassion. Beautiful. And Anna is saying because she lacks self-compassion and the know-how, so very similar to you, that the cerebral might be there, but the how-to is not there. Okay, beautiful. Anyone else?
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You are talking to Tom, disability champion in Yambio, South Sudan.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm getting you. Yeah, I'm saying you are speaking to Thomas James Desi.
Hi, Tom.
One disability champion in Yambio, Western Equatorial State.
I can't make out what you're saying.
You can't hear me?
I can't distinguish what you're saying. You said, what are you telling us why you just chose to join the webinar?
The Lebanon in the morning in our family forum this morning we were being informed by our former disability supervisor, Mrs. Savia.
Okay.
John, she said we have to join this important conversation this evening. We said, okay, that's good. For knowledge, for interaction, you need also to know more about this Lebanon.
Okay. Okay, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Lafika is saying hi, Lafika. She never really thought about the topic and excited to discover more about the session. Okay, so Lafika, I hope that your time is going to be well spent. And I hope that you're going to be able to have some way in which you can introduce this amazing capacity inside of you, as a result of this conversation. And although I have a slideshow, I really want to offer that we engage this as a conversation because there's just so much that I think we can learn from each other in the process. Okay. So let me go back to the slides. Okay. So I'm going to just skip a few slides ahead. I think I've done all of this stuff. And I think one of the feelings that I really just want to share with you is that I'd love to have this conversation with you as if we're just a bunch of people. I was going to say a bunch of girls, but now we've got two guys here. As if we're just a bunch of girls having coffee with each other, sitting around, just having a conversation and really just enriching each other. I want you to really consider that this is a space for exploration. Now, one of the things that interferes with self-compassion is this concept of judgment. And what judgment does is it destroys our capacity for curiosity. And curiosity is this beautiful gift we give ourselves that allows us to learn more about ourselves, about how we interact with people, the impact that we're having, and about other people in the world around us. And I think that as we grow up, we lose our sense of curiosity and we are kind of soaked in judgment. And I'm hoping that you can invoke for yourself that sense of curiosity and that you'll be able to explore this time together with a deep sense of curiosity, not just about the content that I'm sharing with you, but actually about yourself and your own experience, your own responses, your own, thoughts as you're going through this conversation. Obviously, I want to hear your insights. We all want to hear your insights. And if there are questions, please interrupt me and we can deal with the question immediately. And so the invitation really is to start the practice of self-compassion now. And the one thing that I want to say before I start off with talking about all these things is that self-compassion is not a magic wand. There's no switch. I don't have fairy dust to sprinkle all over you and to make self-compassion your jam. Self-compassion is a practice. It's like learning a language. And if you don't practice it on an ongoing basis, it won't become something that you resort to automatically. And if you bring it into your practice, it has the potential to have so many ripple effects on your living day every day, in the sense that it impacts everything that you do, right? So the invitation is choose kindness and curiosity as we go into this conversation. So before we get started, some of you know me, some of you don't know me. So I'm Safia. I call myself a shift stirrer and a boundary whisperer. And there are many, many tools that I use as a coach and as a facilitator, but at the heart of everything I do, what I really and truly want to do, whether I'm working with people personally and privately, or whether I'm working with large groups, what I really and truly want to help people create are healthier, kinder relationships with themselves, because these kinder relationships are few and far between, especially amongst ourselves. I mean, when you have a kinder relationship with yourself, you can have a more authentic and authentically kind relationship with the world around you, rather than the performance of kindness and rather than coming from a place of people pleasing and from compliance. And so in the work that I do, I've had many careers and have succeeded and triumphed at many, many different things. I have cut my teeth in corporate and have built a career in corporate that was quite mind-blowing. I think the fact that I even made my way through high school is a miracle in and of itself. And then going to university is another miracle in and of itself. And for a long time, my strategy for getting on with things was through doing mindset work and just willpowering my way through everything. Now, I don't want to sit here and suggest to you that mindset work is unimportant, and I don't want to be dismissive of it, and I don't want to be dismissive of willpower. I think that they have a place to stay, a place in the way in which we approach things. The challenge is that when we are working exclusively from mindset and exclusively from willpower, these are very, very masculine energies, and they are the ones that make life incredibly challenging for us if we don't have the softer elements to it, which come from the self-compassion, right? And so for a long time, mindset and willpower worked. And I think it started to stop working long before 2019. But in 2019, I had this epiphany that this approach that I was having of no pain, no gain wasn't working for me. It wasn't serving me. I always felt like I was at the edge of a cliff and that I was going to snap into a trillion different pieces in a very, very, very short space of time. I think in 2019, what I might have experienced was a small breakdown. I didn't get help for it, so it wasn't diagnosed or anything, but I came to a complete standstill. And I didn't know that COVID was going to happen. I didn't know that the world was going to come to a standstill. But my commitment at the end of 2019 was that for the year of 2020, I was going to go into an odyssey of exploring what self-love is and what it means to be a better human towards myself. At that point in time, I promise you, and here's Ghalib, he's here to be a witness to it, I was a terror to be around. I was harsh, I was severe, there was no soft edges to me. Everything was an all or nothing kind of game. And I then decided that in 2020, I was going to go into this journey because A, the way in which I was experiencing myself wasn't healthy. And more importantly, the way in which specifically my family was experiencing me was also not healthy. Now, I don't want to say that I'm completely cured of my hard edges. They still arise. But there are more softer times than there have ever been in my life before. And so I made this commitment for self-love in 2020, and lo and behold, the universe conspired with me, and I got a whole lockdown to help me really dive deep into this process. And when I started off on the self-love journey, it kind of felt fluffy to me. It wasn't landing anywhere inside of me. And then I started to learn a lot more about burnout. And it was in my exploration of burnout, and I devoured everything I could lay my hands on when it came to burnout. And as I explored burnout, what ended up happening was I collided, or I came into contact with self-compassion. The irony is that I didn't even understand what the term self-compassion meant. In fact, I didn't even understand what the word compassion meant. I had this vague idea of what it meant, but I was like, I'm not understanding this thing. And so I just dove headlong into it. And if you know me, when I become curious about something, I become devoted to it and I become obsessed. And I just started to I started to hunt it down in every single way. And the irony is at the time that this was happening, the literature for self-compassion started to emerge. In fact, from 2018 to 2019, that's where the first trickle of self-compassion literature started to come through. And then in 2020, it started to really robustly come into the world. And so I felt as though everything was conspiring with me to support me on the journey that I was in, right? So as a product of this mission, of this journey that I've been in, I really have been exploring what my mission is. In 2022, I went on an even deeper odyssey around myself. And I've been thinking really since then about what is the difference I want to make in the world. And I think for me, in a nutshell, I want every human being I interact with to know that they are made for more. And I believe that at the heart of making this my mission, I have to evangelize self-compassion. There is no made for more. There is no you matter in the absence of self-compassion. And I'm going to take you through an exploration about why that I believe that is. And I am going to take you through a bit of an information journey, and then we're going to go through a reflection process. It's very difficult, it's very difficult to reflect if we don't have a bit of context, if that's okay, right? And I'm just reading a comment from Ghalib, and he is saying that self-compassion actually feels outright taboo. And I really identify with that. And I suppose that's why it took so long for me to be able to get the journey of self-compassion from mind down into heart and into body, right? So please stop me if there are any comments or questions, right? So I have a few promises I want to make you, and I hope that you will keep me to my promises. And my animation is a bit squiffier. I'm starting at promise number 2. We're going to explore what self-compassion is and how it serves you and how it serves the results you want to create in your life, regardless of what those results are, whether you want to, go and start a missionary or whether you want to just lose 5 kilos. I say just as if that's easy, or whether you want to have a nicer relationship with yourself. It doesn't matter which results. All results, professional, personal, social, financial, all of them require a high degree of self-compassion. Very often we think about what are the intellectual skills I need, what are the hard skills I need, and then we feel stuck because we are not progressing. The strangest thing is that self-compassion is the lubricant that makes those hard skills work in our lives, right? The other promise that I want to make to you is I want you to discover what it might be that obstructs your self-compassion and the impact that this might be having on you, the results that you desire, and the community that you want to experience your results with and your self-worth. And the third promise is, I want to share 1 or 2 ideas with you about how to become a self-compassion practitioner. Not experts, not fundi, practitioner. Because this is something that we have to practice actively every single day. There isn't a time in which this just becomes your automatic go-to if you don't become a self-compassion practitioner. Okay? And I know there's a number of you on the call that are coaches. And I want to say to you that if this is something that you can bring into your relationship with your clients and help them to discover, you will be changing the world 1 conversation at a time, right? I just want to welcome Farah and Swani, and Nawal's here. Nawal's also my cousin. So welcome to all of you, and I hope that you really are going to find value in the session, and please interrupt and ask questions or contribute to the conversation if there is something that you want to share. So I'd like to share some thoughts with you throughout the conversation today about how to experience a kinder relationship with yourself. Years gone by, I thought I wanted to have effective and powerful and all these other kind of adverbs and adjectives to describe the relationship I wanted with myself. If anyone wants to ask me what do I want to experience in my life, in my relationship with myself, it's just to be kinder. And I've come to realize that this takes real devotion, right? One of the biggest experiences that I've ever had in my life for a long, long time, and I would say that's only in the last 1.5 years, 2 years that this relationship has shifted, is that I used to feel as though I live alongside myself, not inside of myself. And I'd love to see by a show of hands, or if you can come on, if this is something that you identify with. I always had the sense of being outside and observing myself rather than actually being me. Am I the only one that experiences that? Charmaine is shaking her head.
Not necessarily outside, but I think I'm here.
Yes.
I don't think I'm in my body. So it's not like I'm from the outside in looking, but I definitely feel like this is my zone of operation. And I think self-compassion is lower. Yeah.
Right. And so self-compassion is what creates connection with ourselves, right? Because if the relationship is up here, and I'm going to share later on, this is the survival space, right? This is the place of reaction, right? This is not the place actually of being centered and grounded and connected. And so it might be a different experience for you, but it's also, there's a separation in that process, right? I'm checking if there's any comments. Guys, please add to the comments if you don't want to come onto the screen or use audio. I would like to share some thoughts with you as well around just how to be more nurturing and how to be more enabling. Now, I am not suggesting that I'm going to get the Mother of the Year trophy. But I know that in my conversations with my children over the past 2 years, they have softened a lot. And my children come to me with more conversation now than ever before. Whereas previously, I wasn't the one they'd come to. Their dad would be the one that they'd go to. And so it still delights me and surprises me that there is now this ability for us to have conversations and chit chats about things. Sometimes it's significant and sometimes it's insignificant, but I have become someone that they can have this conversation with, right? And I think that this conversation is very relevant to you having the kind of impact that your heart yearns for. Right? My wish for you, for every human being, and I've said this before, is to find yourself and to see yourself as someone who is really, truly, deeply worthy of your kindness and your own humanity. I want to also say to you, I see Hilda's taking notes. If you are lazy to take notes, I know Hilda's a note taker, but if you happen to be lazy to take notes, don't worry. I am sending you the slides. The slides are contained in the workbook. The content is contained in the workbook that I'm going to send to you now. Biel was also saying she's in her head more than operating from the heart. Absolutely. Right? And the head is the do or die survival space, right? So I've already asked this question, but if there are any new thoughts about why you chose to be here, please add them to the comments or share with us. And the more you share with me, the more I know how to navigate the conversation. Now, the strange thing about me is I love making slides, but I also love deviating from the slides. So please ask your questions and make your, insights known. So at the end, I have got a special announcement. I have an offer. I doubt very much if we can get to the offer. I think I will use it all the time. But if I don't get the offer will be in the invitation that I send to you, right? I'm clicking too fast. Anna is saying, what does self-compassion look like? And I think I'm going to start with showing you what self-compassion does not look like, if that's okay with you. Okay? We can't actually talk about self-compassion without talking about judgment and shame. It is fundamentally impossible to understand what self-compassion is if we don't understand judgment and shame, and we don't start to notice the modus operandi that we have in play. So before I share with you my thoughts about what judgment and shame is, I'm hoping I can hear from one or two of you what your thoughts are on what judgment and shame is. And I want to absolutely share with you, there's no right and there's no wrong answer. I think we're all in the right ballpark around what it is, but what are your thoughts about it? Charmaine, I can hear someone.
It's Vuyelwa.
So good to hear your voice.
Hi. Thank you. So to answer your question, I would say where I am currently at. I've I collided with this word functional freeze.
Functional grief.
Functional freeze.
Freeze, yes.
Where you're feeling, functional freeze.
Yeah.
And in that state, I'm having experienced so much trauma, shame, disappointment, and finding myself stuck to even consider the concept of self-compassion. Instead of looking and appreciating the journey that has led me where I am, but I find myself judging myself and being overwhelmed by the shame that I feel is being seen from the outside because of things not having panned out as I hoped they would. So as a result, it then becomes a challenge to even consider being compassionate to myself, because I'm now judging myself, crucifying myself because of the end result.
Very sorry that you're going through that, Viola. It's always challenging when we find ourselves in a situation where things don't go out as anticipated, as desired, and as planned. And I'm so glad that you're raising that, because it's going to give us something really useful to talk about as we progress through the conversation.
Thank you.
I'm really, really hoping, Viola, that for you in particular, or especially, there is something of value that you're going to get out of this conversation, because the smaller shift can create the biggest momentum for you over time. Are there any other thoughts about it? Anyone else?
If I can just say something or comment on something. So what's coming up for me is that sometimes the shame that we feel is because of how we perceive or how we think other people are judging us. And often it's not the case. I think we're our worst enemies because we judge ourselves, the harshest. So I think, I don't know, that just popped into my head. So I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Yeah. That's very true, Charmaine. So what happens for most of us is that how we experience the world is actually, we don't experience the world as we see it. What we actually do is we construct the world, and we project our creation or our construction onto the world externally. And it's really, really important for us to start learning that distinction. And one of the other things, and this is what Viola raised, is, it's a natural thing to do, but we distort what we do, what we create, and the things that happen with who we are. And so it's very important that we have self-compassion practices so that we can unblend all these things, and so that we can create space between our identity in terms of our being and our identity in terms of our doing and our having. Because our doing and our having is something that can very often be the source of, very deep shame. Now, while I'm busy doing this webinar, the cat is here and trying to claw things to pieces. So we really have to spend time, and the job of self-compassion is to honor who we are outside of the doing, outside of the having, and to honor the being part of us, and to give ourselves strength, right? And the one thing I'm going to say to you, I'm like preempting things I'm going to say like 20 slides down the way. If I'm going to say anything about self-compassion that you take away as, something that is doable from today, in my definition of self-compassion, it's about stepping into a relationship with ourselves in which we witness and see ourselves with kindness. And we do this daily. Okay? And we go to a deliberate length to not look at what we do and not look at what we have. We go to a deliberate length to go and look at who we are and how we're experiencing ourselves. And I know that when we start on this journey, it can be incredibly challenging because it's also blurred and blended. So I'm going to give you a few thoughts about what judgment is, and hopefully some dots connect for you. But the very definition of judgment, whether it's internal or external, is that there is a degree of criticism. So judgment is not the same as discernment. Judgment is different. Discernment has got a softness to it, and it has an openness to it. But judgment there's a definitive opinion. More often than not, it's critical. And more often than not, it's about ourselves. And there is this dance between judgments we have of ourselves and judgments we have of people externally. And the more we judge ourselves, what we tend to do is we judge externally to create a tolerance of the judgment that we have inside of ourselves. It quite literally becomes a coping mechanism that we have to judge others so that we can give ourselves some relief. It doesn't mean that we diminish the judgment of ourselves. What we're actually just doing is we're creating a container of more judgment inside of ourselves. And judgment has got this idea of black and white thinking. It's good and bad, right and wrong. And nothing in life is good and bad, right and wrong. If we spend enough time trying to understand what is happening for a person, there are always softer edges that takes it away from the extremes of right and wrong and good and bad. And one of the big challenges that we have, this is certainly one of the biggest challenges that I struggle with. And potentially that is what has kept me stuck for such a long period of time in doing the work that my heart wants to do, is that for me, judgment, especially of myself, created comparison between myself and others. And that fueled my perfectionism, and that fueled my imposter syndrome, and that fueled my self-doubt, and that fueled my stagnation. And then I experienced disconnection and what Real Wakes describes as that functional freeze. So I can be very busy doing things, but I'm effectively standing still because what I believe about what I'm doing is that it's not good enough. And not only is it not good enough, I'm not good enough. Right? And I see Hilda and Charmaine are nodding their heads. And if this is something that you identify with, just let us know in the chat. So these are some examples on the screen of judgment, but I'm sure that you've got your own narrative. You can give me 20 or 30 versions of it. You don't need my help giving two examples of what internal and external judgment looks like. Right? So shame is a version of judgment. Shame goes deep to our worthiness. It goes to not just what we do, it goes to fundamentally who we are. We are not inadequate from the sense of, I need to learn to do something better. It is, even if I have all the expertise in the world, I myself am dysfunctional and wrong, right? And so shame makes us feel incredibly, incredibly inadequate. Shame's cousin is guilt, but guilt is about I've done something. Shame is I am that something terrible. I am unpalatable to myself and I'm unpalatable to the world around me. And when we experience shame, there is this unlovableness, which contributes to that deep disconnection that we experience from ourselves. Because we do not believe we are worthy of our own time, we do not believe we are worthy of our own attention, and we most certainly do not believe we are worthy of our own love and our own admiration and awe. Okay? Am I the only one, or does anyone else identify with this? Okay. The chat's quiet, so I'm going to just go with you guys. The thing about shame, which is far more toxic to our nervous systems than judgment, is that shame thrives in secrecy, it thrives in silence, and it thrives in self-judgment. So this is a definition of shame from Brené Brown, and I really recommend that you explore her definitions around shame. And the thing about secrecy is that secrecy is not about being private. Secrecy is about, if anyone knows this about me, they will disavow me, they will reject me. And nothing is more dangerous to the human mind, the brain itself, than this idea of rejection, right? Rejection is poison to our minds, right? And so what we do is we'd rather judge ourselves first and put ourselves in the dark than expose that to the next person and make ourselves available to the rejection of others. The bitter irony is that when we self-betray, we make connection with other people incredibly challenging. Even if people want to connect with us, we are suspicious of that connection. We are doubtful that they actually want to connect with us for us. And we try to analyze and find reasons and justifications. And so we become very, very obsessed in our minds about what is happening in the background for this relationship. We always say she identifies with it. I'm not alone, right? So any questions or any comments on this aspect of, or this definition or this description of shame? Okay. So these are just some examples, but I'm sure that I don't need to offer you examples. You've got your own, right? So I guess the question is, why do we judge? And the answer is quite simply that it's natural. It's part of our survival mechanism. There is no, in terms of just the primitive physical survival that we are designed for, that our brain is designed for, it doesn't want to have to spend time evaluating every single situation objectively. It creates patterns. Our brain is a pattern-making machine. And when it recognizes patterns, even if that recognition of that pattern is completely obscure and random, the moment it recognizes any of those patterns, it launches into judgment, and it launches into making something right or wrong, and we launch into self-judgment, which makes us right or us wrong, us worthy, us unworthy, right? And every single time we judge ourselves, the thing that we are doing is that we are reinforcing our unworthiness. And it's like it's this vicious cycle that goes over and over and over. So the reinforcement of the unworthiness reinforces the separation, which reinforces the unworthiness, and so it continues. And so for each and every single person that is on this call, none of us are pipsqueaks anymore. We have been doing this process of judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves for a long, long time. It is bone deep in our cells, it's bone deep in our nervous system. And what is so important is to remember that if we want to shift from this, it is going to require effort and practice from us, because this is poison to us physically, mentally, and emotionally. So these are some reasons why we judge. I'm not going to go through them. But even if I fill this page with the reasons for why we judge, I won't have enough space. There are just so many reasons why we judge, because there are so many ways in which we feel as though we are under threat and need to protect ourselves. Okay? So when it comes to this is the part of working with self-judgment that is so important to me. Is there someone wanting to ask a question or make a statement?
No, I need to have an input.
Yes, please.
The reason why we judge. The reason why we judge is we need also to look into what circumstance has happened, and we also need to give right to somebody who is a complainer, or somebody who is having whose right was supposed to be taken away by force. That's why also we also judge. We need to look into the problem of somebody, or to the problem of the both two complainers, to see whether who is having the right to have this thing, or to have that right that they are complaining about.
Yeah. I'm not saying
one way that we need to judge, because the survival might have no power but bringing the issue on front of an authority, then thereafter we look and see how this issue has been happening or how it started. Then thereafter we give the full right to the honor.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, I'm not suggesting for a moment that there isn't a place for judgment, but a healthy form of judgment involves discernment. And so you're looking at information to be open, whereas judgment is about looking at information from a very closed, pre-opinionated perspective, right? Very often when we're looking at judgment from a place of right and wrong, what we are doing is we're looking for confirmation of what we already believe.
Okay, there is one thing that also I need also to put you in quick. There is my bundle will be going off very soon.
Okay.
Because I'm home, and then you will send for us the handout or the recorded version of this meeting.
I will send it.
Okay.
Okay. I will send it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to say again, I'm not suggesting that judgment doesn't have a place. But if we're judging in the narrow band of right and wrong, it's very difficult to make healthy decisions. We can make informed decisions, but they're not necessarily healthy. Bill, you've come onto screen. Are you sharing something? Okay. It's good to see you, Bill. So these are some of the consequences of self-judgment. And I think for me, I've experienced all of them. I've experienced one of the most tragic things, I think, is that I haven't lived the path of my dreams for a long, long time. And if I were to say to you that the difference that self-compassion has made for me is that it has really shifted the pain levels that I carry in my body, and I am not even joking about that. Self-compassion has made it possible for me to risk being seen as myself rather than with my masks on. The thing that I love the most, I marvel at this so often, is that I can now have a brain that is completely blank and vacant. I'm not saying that there isn't thoughts happening, but it's not those stressed, overthinking, overanalyzing, multiple calculations happening very often. So my brain can be in free flow very often. And I suspect that at a very deep level, self-compassion has made it possible for me to explore emotional experiences that I have suppressed for a very, very long time. It's made it possible for me to have challenging conversations with myself. And it's also made it possible for me to have challenging conversations with other people. And if there is anything that I feel is potentially the most important thing in life, and this might be a reach, especially in the relationship that we are in with ourselves, it is that our heart's work will always be limited and compromised if we do not have a measure of self-compassion in our lives. Self-compassion, in the absence of self-compassion, we don't have the ability to start over, right? We feel like things are catastrophic. And we can start over because we must. And we can do what is expected of us. But we don't start over from within our hearts. We start over from survival if we have to start over. But either way, in the absence of self-compassion, it makes it really, really challenging for us to start over. And if we are going to do work from our hearts, starting over is par for the course. You have to do it many, many, many times. Okay? Bill, I'm seeing subtitles on your face. What's happening?
Yeah, I guess I'm just processing and really listening and hearing what you are saying about the starting over and accessing at the heart and really dropping down into the heart space in order to access self-compassion, which I guess then allows an opening to being kinder and forgiving yourself and detaching from, the fantasies we had about our lives and where we thought we'd be. And I guess that's sort of the opening entrance point. So I'm just trying to burn it into my memory.
As an extension of what you're saying, I feel as though self-compassion, and yet I'm really deviating from the slides. I'm like many slides ahead already. Self-compassion is really where we get a lot of courage from. Now, in my own life experience, it was easy for me to do things because I'm in a broader system, like an organization, and there are things that are expected from me, and I have to just perform, right? Working for myself, when there is not that external push, and I see Charmaine she's also self-employed. In the absence of self-compassion, the ability to start over is really, really challenging. It's quite catastrophic when things don't go. And I'm like Viola has already, shared with us how she experienced the fact that things didn't go the way that she had wanted it to go. So my question to you is, when you think about physical, social, mental, emotional, and expansion, like where does self-judgment show up most for you? Where do you see it? Physically, I am going to share with you, until a year and a half, 2 years ago, I couldn't handle my face. I just had so many problems with my face, right? And so my reluctance around photos and being on video, it was just too much for me to bear. And so we have these judgments of ourselves. Physically, there's a social, we play small. Mentally, we are stressing ourselves out and creating misery for ourselves. Emotionally, we can't deal with the difficult emotions, and we're not doing what we want to do in the world. So I'd be very curious to hear from you, where do you see self-judgment showing up the most in your lives?
Yes, for me, it's all of them, but I think if I had to choose a dominant one, it's probably expansion. So that's avoiding of risks, the fear of failure, and just staying small. Even though there's a call to do something bigger, I'm resisting.
That's it. Anyone else? You want to put something in the chat?
If I can comment.
Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, thanks, Charmaine. I think mine is, let's see, social. And it's a very weird one because when I'm looking at social, I'm such a social person. I think in a sense that I would look at somebody and I don't know anything about this person, but already I would project my judgment on this person. And actually, it's something that happened today. And I was able to actually recognize that I am looking at this person. I know nothing about this person, but I've already projected some sort of success that this person has or some sort of good that this person has. And I had to recognize that I'm saying all these things because perhaps I'm lacking them in me, and yet now I'm projecting somebody else. So I was able to see that by just making that judgment on somebody else, I was able to actually then track it down to my side, saying, these are the things that probably I'm wishfulling for them, for myself, for them to come to me in that sense. Yeah, hence I'm saying it's the irony part in terms of self-judgment. So it's projected onto somebody else, but it's actually talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything in our lives is a mirror. Right? Charmaine and Riel, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was this is so interesting because if I was looking at this yesterday, I would have definitely said social with people pleasing. But I had a conversation with one of my ex-bosses today, and the conversation went, because I worked in corporate for 31 years, and I was known to get things done on time, just I was the first one to put my hand up if something needed to be done. And in project management, I was quite good with getting the project, done on time and within budget and what have you. But the people pleasing part, he was saying that it wasn't, he only realized afterwards that it was more about me being happy to do things that made other people happy. And it wasn't about the recognition. I didn't need that. It was more about making other people happy. So yeah, I would have said that kind of yesterday, but today it's more about the overthinking, the self-doubt, and the limiting beliefs. As I've grown a lot in the last few years doing the life coaching course. So I'm aware of it, but I still have those demons that, talk in my head that say, what are you thinking? Well, you can't do this. It's like, are you mad? So yeah, for me, it would be probably mental.
Look, there's nothing wrong with pleasing other people as long as you're the one as long as it brings you pleasure, right? It's when it becomes burdensome that it is a real challenge, right?
Yeah. I think as long as it doesn't compromise who you are as a person and what your beliefs, I think it's okay.
Yeah, well, you were going to say something. Thank you, Charmaine.
Yes. So for me, where I see judgment is coming from is when you find yourself, I think, Safia, you know all about my work history. We've had this discussion, and you find yourself in the crossroad where this propelling thought that you are made for more is just it's now in your face. It's no longer in the heart, in the mind. It's now in your face. But when you look back, it's like you've been performing. You've been doing roles because they were coming through to you, not because you were deliberately journeying towards a specific purpose or mission. And now you find yourself in this crossroad and you look back and you're like, shoo, I've been existing. And now there's that hard question to say, but you can't continue like this. At some point, you need to start making the hard decisions to start the journey that you were supposed to have started 20 years ago. And that's where then the judgment comes in. So where it shows up for me is the expansion and I think it's the mental, the middle one, the self-belief comes in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just reading a comment from Raleigh when he is really echoing what you're saying. And we all get caught up in the roles, right? And I always say that it's almost as if we get institutionalized so early in life, and then we remain institutionalized, and through all the institutionalization, school, varsity, work, all these kinds of things, we forget that we have a beating heart with its own message, a soul with its own message, right? And then the measures against which we evaluate ourselves take us so far away from us, because we didn't even start asking ourselves, what are our own measures for evaluating? What are our own measures for success? What is our own measures for feeling good in our bodies, right? We're always playing these roles up against the expectations that we adopt from the environment around us. And I think that the crossroads is a beautiful place. I know that I sound like a cliche right now, but the crossroads, as much as you hate it right now, it holds the potential for the biggest answers that only you can give. And my message this evening is that self-compassion is the mechanism through which you are able to access those answers. Judgment will keep those answers far, far away from you. But the self-compassion will help you to nurture the answers you are looking for from outside of you. I'm going to continue. I'm seeing the clock is ticking away feverishly, and I haven't even started on what self-compassion is, so I must get myself cracking. So this was an activity I wanted to offer you. I apologize. I'm going to have to skip past it. But I do want you to think about, when are you being severe, and how frequently are you being severe with yourself? And can you distinguish between, is it judgment or shame? Because although it sounds very insignificant, the difference is material. Because shame is subterranean. You've got to dig really, really deep for it, because there are just layers and layers and layers of things on top of it. And you have to be really willing to go into relationship with yourself, which requires a lot of safety and requires a lot of compassion, so that you can even start that conversation with yourself. Okay? So now my cursor isn't moving. It doesn't want me to continue. So these are just some things around the cost of living without self-compassion. I'm going to get into what self-compassion is now before Anna is very not compassionate with me. She asked the question earlier on. And so self-compassion is your ideas that we have. Certainly I had this idea about self-compassion, that it's a weakness. I've come to learn that it takes extraordinary emotional strength to be compassionate with ourselves. I have a lot of the work that I do, because I work with people through burnout, and I work with people through confidence and boundaries and brand. If your confidence is not supported by self-compassion, you are relying very heavily on self-esteem, and that makes your confidence brittle, because you are still looking externally for the validation that you have to offer yourself internally for sustainable confidence. This is my own life experience. I am so skilled at self-sabotaging. And until recently, self-sabotage was I was an A player when it came to self-sabotage. And over the past 2 or 3 years, self-compassion has made it possible for me to mitigate the self-sabotage. And this is what I also witness and experience with my clients. The moment self-compassion enters the fray, they can start growing, however small the growth is. I've come to the conclusion that self-compassion is an absolute prerequisite for resilience, especially if the resilience is not survival resilience. We tend to know how to survive, but we don't know how to use resilience to thrive. And when it comes to thriving resilience, then self-compassion becomes really, really vital to us. If you have any questions, please interrupt me. Self-compassion is also essential for boundaries. There is such risk to us when we set boundaries that if we cannot create safety for ourselves, we really only set those boundaries when absolute survival is on the table, right? If I'm going to burn out completely, if I can't take anymore, then we set the boundaries. What we want to learn is to set boundaries from a place of self-compassion so that we set them well in time so we can preserve what is important to us. Charmaine is smiling, she knows the story, right? So Anna, I'm finally going to tell you what self-compassion is. So self-compassion, as simple as its definition is, it's also this complicated. Self-compassion is the practice of really giving yourself the same kindness that you would give to someone you really, really, truly, deeply care about. We very often confuse self-compassion with feeling sorry for ourselves. It's like giving ourselves an out. And self-compassion is not about giving ourselves an out. Self-compassion is actually about helping ourselves to stay and to build emotional resilience and stick with what it is that we are investing ourselves into. Okay. I'm using Kirsten Neff's definition of self-compassion. The first one, I don't know what is happening with my email now, but it's just popping like crazy. Self-compassion is the first element is the capacity to be kind to ourselves. Now this sounds simple. My resistance to self-compassion lay here. I could not fathom how to be kind to myself because after all, I was an idiot, right? I was a fool. After all, I wasn't worthy of this kindness because, hey, I was betraying myself on a regular basis. And, you know, I have got all these qualifications and all this knowledge and all this information, but I can't even put a simple thing into the world, right? So there's all these stories about, so how do you be kind to yourself? Like you're being a poof or something like that, right? And so self-kindness is actually one of the biggest challenges to self-compassion. Because there is this idea that in order to get us going, we have to be severe with ourselves, right? Because what did they do with us in school? They penalized us to get us to perform better. When you're in the work environment, you get put under performance management, you get penalized to do better, as opposed to, right now we're getting a working world where there is more support available. But in years gone by, you were spoken about badly. And even if you weren't put on performance management, you were just treated in a way that was unkind. Okay? And then there's this idea of being part of common humanity. In Kirsten Neff's definition, she talks about this idea that when things go wrong in our lives, we make it as if we're the only ones for whom things go wrong for. We are comparing ourselves, like Anna said earlier on, to everyone who is amazing. And we forget that they had an experience of struggle themselves. We just don't know about it. And they don't narrate it to us. But every human being struggles. And we can recognize that other human beings struggle. But if we can start understanding and start accepting that our struggle is part of what makes us human, and it's part of what makes us relatable to other human beings, we can start letting go. Instead, what we do is we isolate ourselves when things get hard and difficult. And when we have to perform, we don't think of ourselves as just being someone who is doing their best. We bring perfectionism into the fray. We bring imposter syndrome into the fray. And we quite literally immobilize ourselves. And we get into that functional freeze that Riel was talking about earlier on. Until we can respect our common humanity and our core humanity, it is really challenging for us to move forward if there isn't like a carrot or a stick kind of mechanism creating that propulsion for us. And this is the part of self-compassion that I think challenges most human beings. It's mindfulness. Hilda and my coach define mindfulness as bringing your mind to where your body is. Our minds are always somewhere else, especially when it's in judgment mode. I think of mindfulness as that container, that space that we create for ourselves to be in an active, deliberate relationship with ourselves. In the absence of mindfulness, there is busyness, there is distractedness, and there is no relationship with ourselves in the absence of mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that most human beings resist. We create busyness to avoid ourselves, because when we are not busy, we have to deal with the discomforts that travel inside of our bodies. We have to deal with all the stuff that comes up. I was coaching a client today, and she was saying she went on to leave on the 22nd of December. She was absolutely fine. She was completely well on the 22nd of December. By the 23rd of December, her body conked, and she found herself in an emergency room on a drip, because suddenly everything caught up with her, right? And she continued to be unwell until the day before she had to go back to work. Because the space is so challenging, because we have to endure our actual experiences, right? And so when I think about mindfulness, I think about mindfulness like holding ourselves like a bird in the hand, right? Firm enough to ensure that a bird that is injured won't fall, but loose enough to allow it to fly. There are two kinds of self-compassion. The one kind of self-compassion is gentle, soft self-compassion. And the other kind of self-compassion is what's called, and this is also in Kirsten Neff's definition of self-compassion, she talks about fierce self-compassion, the ability to parent ourselves, to be the parent that says, no, you're not going to have a sleepover tonight, you've got exams tomorrow. But to do it in a way that isn't severe and aggressive, to do it in a way that says, I'm doing this for you and with you. I'm not against you. I'm not attacking you. I'm not assaulting you. I'm not demeaning you. I'm not diminishing you. I'm not taking away from your worthiness. I am actually here to hold you to your own agenda, because your agenda matters. And one of the things that Kirsten Neff talks about is that the opposite of self-judgment is not self-esteem. It's actually self-compassion. Now, the challenge that most of us grew up with is that we learn to esteem ourselves. We learn to make ourselves bigger, and we learn to, give ourselves milestones against which we grow and which we can hold ourselves against. Self-esteem is still performative. The difference between self-esteem and self-compassion is that self-esteem still has elements of compassion, of comparison and performance, whereas self-compassion is about you in your divinity, in your worthiness, in your humanness. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of your own self-compassion. In the event that the world does not give you compassion, you can still give you your own. Self-compassion is about really and truly having your own back, and about generating an internal ally. So this is the two types of self-compassion that she talks about. The examples here are soothing, it's kindness, it's self-acceptance, or tender self-compassion. The first time I learned to soothe myself, I thought I was being an absolute weirdo. I actually hid from my family. And I did like a hug to myself. And I did this for months. For months, I would do it behind closed doors, because I thought they're going to think I'm a total weirdo. But our own touch matters, right? Our own kindness matters, and our own self-acceptance matters. One of the biggest journeys I think any human being can go on is this journey of self-acceptance. But there is no self-acceptance without self-compassion, because self-compassion is what makes us safe for us to accept all the different versions of ourselves. It's very hard to accept the version that shouts at your children. It's very hard to accept the version that is ugly to other people. It's very hard to accept the version that points fingers in traffic and that kind of thing, right? It's very hard to accept the version that does underhanded things from time to time, right? But we all have human experiences and we do things from a place of survival. And so we do things that aren't necessarily nice and comfortable. And so can we accept those parts of ourselves? Because until we accept those parts of ourselves, we can't experience wholeness. And until we experience wholeness, we will operate from a place of disconnection and even disassociation from ourselves. Because I've certainly done ugly things in my life. And those ugly things made me literally disconnect from myself. Right? And by the way, the scale at which we judge ourselves is never fair towards ourselves. It's always stacked against us. We will judge the next person far less harshly for the same thing than what we will judge ourselves. Right? And the thing about not accepting ourselves means that we are operating from a place of blame. There's literally a permanent accusation that we are launching against ourselves. And even if it's not operating in our conscious mind, it's operating in the background. And when we are operating from a place of self-blame, we will never achieve a feeling of feeling good enough, let alone made for more. Right? So fierce self-compassion is the compassion that I referred to early on. It's boundaries. It's rules, but not their rules. It's our own rules, and rules that serve us, rules that involve and include kindness towards ourselves. It's about really advocating for ourselves with others and with ourselves. It's talking ourselves into our dreams and not out of our dreams, right? And you need a regulated nervous system to be able to talk yourself into your dreams. And so the soothing, the tender compassion is really important, because the tender compassion is what helps you to regulate your nervous system so that you can operate from a place of self-advocacy and so that you can take action. I will say to you that until I started to work with my nervous system and actively regulate it, taking action was an absolute no-no for me. I was blitzed out of my mind. I would get so far as to do all the work, but to put the thing into the world wasn't going to happen, right? And then I judge myself for that as well, right? And so through compassion, through tender compassion, I learned how to advocate for myself. And all of these things are sequential and they require practice. Self-compassion is not a quick fix. For that, you're probably going to need something external, but internally, it comes with practice. So one of the, I've alluded to this before, I believe, and I'm not going to go over it again, I believe that self-compassion is absolutely vital for confidence, resilience, and boundaries. Each one of these is brittle in the absence of self-compassion. I had all of these things because I had a lot of self-esteem, and my self-esteem was scaffolded against very, very, tightly work that I was doing in corporate and all these kinds of things. But the moment that stuff fell apart, all of this stuff was obliterated. It fell apart completely. And so it is really important that we start to root these things in a really, really compassionate relationship with ourselves. Because when things go wrong, we need to be able to restart on each and every single one of these. And we need to be able to rely on these to keep us going when our energy and our resilience is running low. We fear self-compassion simply because we feel it will make us weak, we'll stop striving, and simply because we don't deserve it in our thoughts. All the research shows, and I have gone through a lot of research, all the research shows that performance in all measures, whether it is just looking after yourself and your well-being, your family, whatever the case might be, increases when we have self-compassion. And the reason why it increases is because within self-compassion is this mindfulness, and inside of mindfulness is the self-regulation, right? And so it is almost essential for every single transformation, every single up level that you are anticipating or contemplating, that you bring self-compassion into the agenda for yourself, right? I'm just going to go through this very quickly. These are the consequences of, or these are the ways in which the stress responses show up. The fight response for me was overworking. I could avoid things. And my overworking was accompanied by a high dose of self-criticism and perfectionism, which meant I just had to do more work, right? We all know that's routine. Flight is avoidance. My avoidance of choice is procrastination. I can be very busy doing nothing or doing a lot and going nowhere. And then freeze is indecision and self-doubt, rethinking the same thing over and over and over and over, making new decisions over and over and never taking action. And then fawn, of course, is we will do what people expect us to do. Or we will do what we've projected as expectations onto other people. We think that they expect us to do things. One of the things that I've learned is that very few people expect what I thought they expected from me. I magnified their expectations. And then I performed to that magnified performance. And in the process, I lost myself along the way. Okay? My own agenda for my life, I lost along the way. So these are some ways in which you can start integrating self-compassion into your life and getting out of survival mode. I will say to you, my journey, it probably only started, Nawal saying she can tick all of, yeah, absolutely. I would say to you, for me, it took me about a year of staying with self-compassion before things here started to shift. Before doing these things started to shift for me. Soothing touch, one of the things that I do is butterfly touches, or just putting my hand on my heart and just literally feeling myself. The weirdest things happened in my body when I started to speak nicely to myself. It felt so cringy, but I'm grateful that I stayed with it. And I will send with the workbook a whole list of self-kindness statements. I promise you, it was like, oh, no one else knew I was doing it. I did self-compassion in secrecy, by the way, for a long, long time, right? And there's asking, does self-compassion have to be done behind the scene on your own? Is this the only way to have self-compassion? No. I think that my breakthrough in self-compassion came because I went into a container of women, not women, sorry. I went into a container of people who went on a journey with me, and we were led by someone. And when the things came up in our thoughts and stuff, we had a place to go and share it with. And that is why I think Charmaine was saying, that she went through a process. It still comes up. But because she has this container, there's a way in which to mitigate it. But you learn self-compassion, in my experience, both privately and in community. It's not an either or. And I want to also say, I cannot do self-compassion without being physical. For me, self-compassion is about moving and allowing my body and my mind to go into sync with each other. So I actually can't do self-compassion by moving and going to gym and counting reps and all those kinds of things. It has to be moving, something as simple as washing the dishes. But doing things on autopilot and allowing just, thoughts to surface and for me to notice things and let it waft through, right? Self-compassion is about body, mind, heart, and soul. So there are ways in which to do that by yourself and ways in which to do it in community. My recommendation is always do both, right? I know I'm over time. If you have to leave, I respect that, but then I hope you'll get the tail end of the recording, okay? Movement and breath work is also important for, I've spoken about movement already, but breath work is so important. 3 long breaths. If you're doing 3 breaths that last for 40 seconds or longer, those 3 breaths together last for 40 seconds or longer, you're already going to take your nervous system from the activated nervous system into the rest nervous system, right? And it is something so simple like breath. But so often I find myself doing this little thing because quite literally I forget to breathe and I'm breathing shallowly because I'm stressed or anxious, right? And so I started making a big habit out of doing breath work regularly. So I do prayers 5 times a day, and I have decided that that is my time in the day where I breathe the longest, right? And it is a time in the day where I do my self-kindness statements, and it's a time of the day in which I do a lot of reflection and that kind of thing. If you don't have that process in your, or that space in your day, generate that space and create it deliberately, because it's not going to happen by accident. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. So there was the reflection exercise that I wanted you to do earlier on, and then we were going to complete it now by bringing self-compassion in, and I hope that you will give yourself the space to do this exercise. But self-compassion at the end of the day is about how you have a conversation with yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally, at all levels, right? This is another process that I want to share with you, that I am sharing with you in the workbook. This is a process you can YouTube it. It's by a woman by the name of Tara Brach. I don't think I'm saying her name properly. And she has this process called RAIN. And RAIN is about really and truly sitting with yourself, talking to your emotion, naming your emotion with kindness, making space for it instead of pushing it away. When those terrifying feelings come up, just staying with it, and then investigating with curiosity and not criticism what it might be, alluding to, or just be a beginning point to, a gateway to. And then it's about literally nurturing. So that's that thing about Kirsten Neff, she talks about self-soothing, right? So these are some daily self-compassion practices that you can try. I am not suggesting you go and do the big stuff first. A 30-second self-kindness check-in, just honoring the fact that you're worthy of your self-kindness, saying something nice about yourself, saying no without guilt. And this doesn't have to be a big no. It can be a no that you say to yourself. Like earlier on, I wanted to shove some knickknacks down my mouth because I was hungry and I didn't have food. I had to make something. And I said no without berating myself in the process. I will send you some self-compassion journaling points. You can use that. Your body is important to the self-compassion journey and creating self-care rituals. And I want to come back to Hilda's question early on, and what's the difference between self-care and self-compassion? I really think that self-compassion can include self-care, because self-care very often involves touch and the body and sensuality and all those kinds of things. And that is important for self-compassion. I fear, though, very often that self-care is the opposite of self-compassion sometimes. It is quite literally a distraction or an escape mechanism. I have sat in a salon one day while a woman is busy having her nails done, she is on the phone and she is organizing a whole bunch of things and she's stressing herself out. And technically speaking, you can say it was a self-care activity. But she wasn't still with herself. She wasn't giving herself the space to just be. And so it depends on how you're doing your self-care. How you're doing your self-care, if it is an escape mechanism, and you're not actually setting boundaries and not doing the fierce self-compassion, and you're just not dealing with your emotions, you're doing it to distract yourself, then I would say it's probably quite futile in the context of self-compassion. I mean, it's enjoyable, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to amount to self-compassion. One of the things that I think we all celebrate, and I'm going to, all the women that I know on this call struggle with it. I don't know everyone on the call, but the ones that I do know, celebrating is incredibly challenging. And yet celebrating is a self-compassion practice. Okay? I've called my newsletter Small Shifts, Big Magic, because in my own journey, especially my self-compassion journey, it was the smallest shifts that I am now so grateful for. The day that I hid in the study and I patted myself and gave myself a butterfly hug, the moments in which I put my hand on my heart, the moments in which I allow myself to cry and put my hand on my heart. These are small moments that I can't necessarily even remember all of them, and each by itself might seem insignificant. But the cumulative impact has been one there where I can stay with myself. I have access to the level of regulation where even when things get difficult and I'm dealing with difficult emotions, I can stay with myself. I don't know if Vali was still on the call, but 2 or 3 Saturdays ago, I blew my gasket. I don't even know what happened, but I started shouting at him. Until now, I don't even know what set it off. A version of myself existed that would never apologize to him. But self-compassion and treating myself kindly in the moments after it made me able to go back and to apologize and to be the decent human being that I aspire to be, right? The previous version of me would have played, we'll wait it out kind of game, right? And so, probably the sending hearts, right? And so the only question I have for you then is, are you willing? It's really the only thing is, are you willing to stay with yourself? And are you willing to learn how to do it? Anna is saying some of the stuff I mentioned, I have done them and didn't know I was displaying self-compassion. Anna, this week, we had a session this week and you were displaying so much self-compassion. You're becoming a fundi. It's just that we have to stay with the game over a long period of time. Because we do fall out of the self-compassion behavior, right? And then can we return to it over and over and over? So the question I have for you is, are you willing? And that is a question I guess each and every single one of you will sit with. Are you willing to do daily practices that make self-compassion part of your life? Are you willing to do the mindfulness that makes self-compassion part of your life? Are you willing to step into a conversational pattern with yourself that makes it possible for you to stay in dialogue with yourself rather than need to escape from yourself, right? So I don't even know how far over time I am. I am not going to share the special offer with you now out of respect for your time. But are there any questions? I'm already 10 minutes over. Are there any questions before I go?
Sophie, it's not a question. It was something that I came across on social media while doom scrolling. And for me, I found it quite a powerful exercise, and I'm not quite sure how and if it fits in here, but I'm feeling called to share. And it's around that that self-judgment and that internal criticism and our internal critic that we live with. And for some of us, that voice is really, really loud. And in this clip, it was in a lady's living room, and she asked friends in her neighborhood to bring a photograph of them as a young child. And you've obviously seen it. And she sits down with them and she asks them to say the things that they say to themselves in their head to this photograph of themselves as little children. And it's just so moving because people can't do it. And just that exercise of almost seeing ourselves as that little person, we can't help but feel compassion for ourselves when we see the little version of ourselves. So I don't know, use it. I just thought I'd mention that as another exercise for maybe getting something started.
Absolutely. So that was absolutely an exercise that I did right in the beginning. It was also one of the exercises that I did in secrecy, because it did feel a bit weird. And obviously, especially in the coaching that we often go into interacting with the younger version of ourselves. And it's so fascinating to me, even without the picture, if you just invoke that younger version of yourself, it's almost inevitable that you're going to have compassion for that version of yourself. I had the same lady had the coaching session of today. I mean, we spoke about the 24-year-old self, and she just mentioned the 24-year-old self, and the tears started to come. Right? So I absolutely love that activity. Okay. So are there any questions? You've come up, your mic is on, not on mute, so I'm
Yes.
assuming there's something.
Yes. I wanted to ask, so what would be your advice for someone who's who hasn't done self compassion exercises, finds themselves having isolated themselves, disconnected from the community or from family, from the friends, because of they sitting in whatever it is that they currently facing, but now they are willing to do the work because it is lonely, being in the space that they are in. So how would one transition back into the community?
Self-compassion is so essential to vulnerability, and vulnerability is essential to authenticity. And so many of us integrate with people, and our strategy for integrating with people is fitting in and playing the standards game, meeting the milestones and all those kinds of things. Sometimes those standards don't matter to us. It's an absolute farce. We judge the standards themselves, but we play to the standards, then we judge ourselves yet again. And other times, there are ways in which we are masking up in order to live the standards, right? And the only way to really integrate yourself back into the communities that you are talking about, I would imagine it's your own immediate community, is actually to spend and find ways to really just start being truthful and vulnerable with yourself. It's really hard to start doing it with other people. And then if you have a community, so the offer that I have is a program. And so if you can find your way into a program, whether it's mine or somebody else's, It's to start being on a journey with other people who are on a journey like yours. It's very hard to be on a journey towards your own authenticity in the context of self-compassion or vulnerability with people who know you. Because you already have so many preloaded projections about what they will think about you. So you almost have to go somewhere to find your courage. So I was very fortunate, I was very blessed that I had a community that I went to, and I went to find my courage. The second thing that happened for me was through spending time with myself, through spending time with my community, it's not an either-or kind of situation, I started to find the language for my experiences. Now, what happens is that it's a whole bunch of busy stuff happening in our bodies and in our minds, and it's all blended, and we confuse what is happening for us to what should be happening, what could be happening, what must be happening, what people expect to be happening. It is all just a big jumble. And so there is a process of slowing down that is needed to start isolating what is fact, what is fiction, what is fear, what is potential. All of these things are so jumbled inside of us. And our brains distort so many different things that we actually have to come to a place where we find a bit of equilibrium. It takes a lot of courage to start being our real self with people who know us in a different capacity. I'm going to share an example with you. When my cousin Zainab registered for this thing, this webinar, I saw her name and I felt my heart drop through my digestive system, right? Because she knows me in one context and not in another. And so to be seen by your people as a version that they're not familiar with, it's quite a revelation. And so what you have to give yourself the space for is to allow the masks to fall off gently. And sometimes the masks fall off by yourself, and sometimes they fall off by community. And the strangest thing is, in the community accepts you, and that gives you a bit of courage, and gives you a little bit more courage, and a little bit more courage. And so it's a progression of masks dropping off. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't already start revealing yourself and integrating yourself back with your folks and your family and your community. It's just, it's too brutal to do it in one cold sweep, especially if you've got high levels of shame, especially if you are feeling as though they're judging you because things didn't go the way that you had expected, right? And obviously there are varying degrees of these things. But there is a high degree of, and I put this word in inverted commas because I don't like this word, but there's a high degree of healing that has to happen. But it's actually not healing. It's integrating the parts that you've exiled. You've sent parts of you, you've repressed parts of you, and you're just integrating parts of you back and back and back. And you're loving the part that disappointed you. And you're learning to really spend time with a part of you that, I'm going to swear now, I can't not swear anymore. It's now my bandwidth needs to swear. Like there's a part of you that maybe in me, I've got arsehole tendencies. So can I love the part of me that's an arsehole, right? There's a part of me that's a terrorist. Can I love that part? There's a part of me that is quite sneaky. Can I love that part of me? Now, whilst coming on to confirm that I'm an arsehole. So how do you, it takes a lot of process, Vilwa, and it takes patience and time, right? And as much as I say it takes patience and time, it's not time in terms of days and months and stuff. It's about being present with yourself. A single moment of integration can help something collapse. And so I did a process with a client today, and she looked at me bewildered because she said, the thing that she was worried about, I asked her, so on what scale is she experiencing it now? She looked at me bewildered, like it's not there anymore, right? But it's not like we just did the process in that moment. she's been preparing herself for this, and this was the moment of transformation. Right? Wasn't a magic moment. So I hope I'm answering your question well. See, you've gone off camera, but I know
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Any
Yeah,
other
it's
comments?
the video is just
Distorted.
crazy, so that's why I took off the video. But thank you so much.
No problem. So any other questions? Any other comments? I'm almost at 9 o'clock. I'm so sorry. Now, while you came on, was it only about me being an arsehole? Was there something else as well?
It actually wasn't that tough, yeah. No, I wanted to agree with so many of the points that you've made. And I can so relate to a lot of the content that you shared this evening, because often I found, that I was in that fight flight mode. And I think I've given myself permission, and as you know, you've known me for many years, that I was always self-reluctant. I didn't think that I was able to do. But I think I've given myself permission to take that leap of faith and to give myself permission to take the next step in my journey.
Yeah.
And I think often we look at other people and we think what people are going to think of us. And so that self-judgment is always there. And yes, I'm a people pleaser, but I have given myself permission to think about myself and put myself first for a change. So thank you for sharing.
You're very welcome. And I'm very happy you and Zainab came to join us. Like, as much as my stomach did things, I'm so happy. But I also just want to say, like, Viola, I hope that you heard that. Nawal's been on a big journey, like a big, big journey. And it didn't happen overnight. And so if I were to say that Nawal was like a people pleaser deluxe, right? On super extra, supercalifragilistic, espialidocious levels. And now she is living a life on terms that work for her. So it is possible, but you have to have a degree of patience with yourself and a willingness. Thank you, Nawal. Swane, I see your hand is up. You have a hand up, like a thingy.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
I wanted to start by saying I appreciate all that you shared, and I found that there's somewhere I felt like this is actually me, because I was thinking about when you were talking about where we believe we do something because we think that is what is expected of us. So we have this high expectation of that thing on others, then we think is the very same thing they expect from us. Then we find ourselves overdoing certain things because we just have this scale or the standard that we have in our heads. And I think that is actually what had happened to me for a very long time, because I'll be like, but they could have done this. They can possibly manage this if they can do this. Then I find myself trying so hard to achieve certain things that are out of my reach because I have thoughts of other people doing that particular thing. And sometimes it's even something that I don't even like or doesn't even make me happy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a vicious circle, right? It's a vicious cycle because we impose it on ourselves and we project it onto others. And then when they don't do it, we either overcompensate or we start judging, and then we drive everything harder. And we're not doing it only to ourselves, we're doing it to everyone. And the whole system starts to implode. And it's really important. I haven't shared this previously in the session, but the moment we start introducing self-compassion to ourselves, we actually end up nursing an entire system, because we start to relate to human beings in a different way. And that is why I spoke so much about boundaries, and I believe that boundaries and resilience and self-compassion are so intertwined, because we know how to slow things down. We become skilled at slowing things down. That process of mindfulness is where we catch this pattern of behavior. Unfortunately, this pattern of behavior, Tshwane, continues because we don't have a space in which to slow down long enough to catch it. We just are at the effect of it all the time. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. I am so. Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to say I have a question about, so when you start being self-compassionate and doing all the work and the activities that help you to be to have the self-compassion, like how do you react to the thoughts that makes you that comes to your head, and you feel like you'll maybe push people away, or maybe sound or look in a way that you won't be able to relate with people you used to relate with?
Yeah. So absolutely. I think I'm going to give you I had two strategies that were coexisting, but possibly had more. But the two that come to mind now are, on the one hand, when it was awkward and difficult, I had a phrase. Instead of judging myself, my default setting was judging myself, because I can't even do that properly, right? But then I swapped that out for how fascinating. And it took a couple of weeks, but how fascinating became almost a default for those specific activities that was around self-compassion, which is not to say it became a default for in my life on a regular basis. But just shifting that language, and so much of self-compassion is about shifting language. And then in another context, I didn't start revealing my journey to everyone immediately. I'm going to go back to the answer that I gave to Parshamain. I hope you got something out of it. Okay, good. I'm going to go back to what I said to Viola, which was, it takes time, and you have to have that space in which it is safe for you to be strained, to be difficult. So I did have a space because I was in a community. I was going through the transformation with other people. And then I was just my old normal self in my other life. The thing that is fascinating, though, is that once the transformation starts integrating with you, you can no longer stop doing it. Your authentic self will emerge and your relationships will shift. In the short term, in my experience, only in the short term, certain relationships didn't go well. But over time, they seem to be coming right again, because the people need space to adjust. Because when you change, they don't know what to do with you. Because all of us exist in a dance with each other. So if I'm aggressive, the other person is whatever they are. So if I stop being aggressive, the other person has to find their way of dancing with me in this new way in which I'm dancing. If I'm typically very demure and very compliant, and I'm no longer demure and I have boundaries, the other person is not going to enjoy that very much. They're going to have to figure out who they must be. And the advice that I have for myself in these situations is, as much as I can be patient with myself, I also have to be patient with them. If the relationship is important enough, they will come back, or they won't drift too far away. But in the short term, you won't see a big shift in the short term because you're learning this. And it's not a quick thing to learn. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yeah, you have answered it very well, because I was wondering, because I'm this kind of compliant person. So I was wondering now, if I start with certain boundaries and being more kinder to myself, and understanding where I do what and how I do it. And I was just confused on
Yeah.
how I can really do that, because I think I've tried before and I gave up because I was like, but this is going to chase people who I think are very important to me. Are we okay? The thing I think that I maybe I might highlight is that one other thing about me is I'm visually impaired. So it was sometimes fear from a point of, okay, how will I be now surviving by myself? Who will be there around to assist? As you know, in some instances, there are times I feel like, okay, here I am quite limited and I might need some assistance from this particular person. So I find myself getting to comply to many things that I don't even feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm gonna end the call now because it is 9 o'clock already. But I just want to say, if you do things in iterations and you get yourself ready for transformation at different levels on an ongoing basis, then you give yourself the space to grow into the boundaries you really want, right? But you can't, not you can't, I don't recommend making big changes in one go because your nervous system won't be able to hold it.
Yeah.
So it's about being kind and patient with yourself. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, ladies, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for spending the evening with me and allowing me to do my heart's work. You're very welcome, Viola. I am going to send you the recording. I hope that you will use the workbook that I send you. And I am putting together a program. If you want to take this further, you're welcome to call me and have a chat with me about it. So I hope you have a good night's sleep. You're very welcome, Anna. Bye. You're welcome. Oh, Zainab, I will come tomorrow. Bye.